Well, welcome to another edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin. It has been an amazing 3 weeks in American politics, but of course it affects us all. It all started with a bad debate performance by Joe Biden. We went on to witness an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and then a sitting president declares that he is standing down. It's an amazing time because at the center of this election, it's all about a group of people called the working class, which is why we have reached out to a woman by the name of Batya Ungar-Sargon. She has written a couple of books in her life. She is currently the opinion editor at Newsweek, but she's written a couple of books. One was entitled Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy. And then her newest one, Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. And that is, of course, the people that are key to how this vote unfolds. Welcome, and so nice to meet you. I've been watching you and listening to you and reading you, but it's very nice to meet you in person.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
That's great. Well, let's just start with the politics of it all. You were actually at the Republican convention and reporting for the Free Press and your own job, your day job. Where do you think we are now? Is Kamala going to be the candidate? Does this change the calculation for Donald Trump dramatically? What's your quick take?
It does seem like she's going to be the nominee. The Democratic elites who collectively encircled Joe Biden to stab him in the back, in the front, wherever they could land their knives, seem to be lining up behind her rather neatly. She has a very good relationship with Wall Street, and so she's getting that funding in. So it does seem like it's going to be Trump-Harris. And honestly, I cannot wait for those debates. I don't know if he's going to debate her. He may feel that it's too junior league for him, but that would be some fun TV, let me tell you.
But it does really change it for him because his secret has been since 2016, and you wrote about this in the book about Bad News as well, which is he has figured out the message that the working class men and women can hear, particularly those folks in the Rust Belt whose lives have been so dramatically affected. So how does he continue to do that with a different candidate? It was easier with Biden, let's put it kind of bluntly, an aging old white guy with cognitive problems. This is a different game.
Yeah, I do hope that the Trump campaign focuses on Kamala Harris's record rather than any sort of personal attributes about her. I mean, there are a lot of things that are true about Kamala Harris that I just hope they leave on the table, because you can activate someone's kind of racial tribal identity by making them feel defensive of somebody even that they don't like. I know this is a Jewish person. There's a great joke, what's the definition of anti-Semitism? And it's, hating Jews more than absolutely necessary, right? And, one can be activated to defend someone one hates when you feel that that person is being attacked for their, for a physical characteristic or attribute, especially if you share that. And I would say if, the Trump campaign was listening to me, I would say, let the Democrats be the ones to tell the hurting working class, but don't you want to elevate this woman of color? Like, let them be the side to focus on this passe, version of what it means to be a progressive, this identity politics garbage that was in effect the patina that the left put on their abandonment of the working class. And Donald Trump should just keep honing his message. Until now, he when he was running against Biden, who was cognitively impaired for the last 2 years, and anyone watching conservative news knew that,
right,
by and large, Trump kept his message on policy, on the broken border, on inflation. He would make a quip every now and then. We wonder who's running the show. But he did not focus on, Biden's incapacities due to the physical characteristics of his age. And I truly hope that they will focus on that. Kamala Harris is the border czar, right? Like there's a lot there. There is a lot to deal with there where we don't have to focus on the other stuff. And it's going to be challenging, not because I think he relishes the fight, although of course he does. It's going to be challenging because the Democrats are going to make this about race and gender. And it's going to be very hard to simply ignore that and tune it out and keep running the campaign on the issues. But that's what I think they really need to do.
Although I've got to say that I think I was just listening to CNN that actually said she was not the border czar. She was in charge of solving the root causes of why people were coming across the border illegally. So you can see that the storyline is changing a bit. On another day, we'll go back and do your book on bad news, because the media keeps making the same mistake of really not understanding the people that they're talking about. And what I loved about this book is you just really said, okay, everybody, including you, were totally surprised when Donald Trump won the election in 2016. And then you suffered from Trump derangement syndrome and the world was going to come to an end. But you said about saying and answering the question as to why he won. And it's because he was speaking to a group of people who felt unheard.
That's exactly right. And, you know, in 2016, it was by and large the white working class. By 2024, he has made extensive inroads into the Hispanic working class. He's polling at a majority of Hispanics, and that community is by and large a working class community. And he's polling at 40% of Black men. And that is because in America, the class divide runs deeper than the racial divide. It runs deeper than the gender divide, although, of course, there are correlations there. There's huge solidarity in the working class. And I would think it would be a really devastating turn of affairs for him to squander those gains that he has made in the multiracial working class. Because he's running against Kamala Harris. She really is one of these sort of factory manufactured Democrats like Hillary Clinton, who doesn't truly believe anything, who has changed her mind on every issue, whether it's criminal justice or Israel or the border. She will say whatever she thinks is popular. And, you know, that is the thing about her, right? She is part of the elites. She has been manufactured to please the elites and to flatter the egos of Democratic elites. And that's really what this election is still about. It's about the elites versus the working class. And Donald Trump has been waging class warfare against the elites.
So let's do this, because your assessment in this book is really the huge divide in America is not between or amongst races or between Democrats and Republicans. It's a class divide. You have a whole group of people that are college educated and a whole group of people that aren't. And everybody that's in the college educated group believes that that's the future. And if we could just send everybody to college, we wouldn't have these problems, these issues. But that's not who the working class is, or how they see themselves, or how they want to be.
That's correct. Only a third of Americans go to college, and the economy actually cannot sustain even that. So about 50% of college grads are what's called underemployed, meaning they're working in jobs where they're not using skills they were taught in college, although infuriatingly, they still make more money than people who don't have a college degree. And meanwhile, we have a massive crisis of skilled trades folks because President Obama defunded vocational training in order to funnel everybody into college, where they would become, you know, good card carrying Democrats, right? It's no secret why they love that as a plan. And, you know, working class people are extremely proud of the work that they do. The thing about the elites is the reason that they thought everyone should go to college is because they would rather kill themselves than clean toilets for a living. But a lot of Americans get a lot of dignity from working with their hands for a living, from changing the diapers of the elderly, from sitting in trucks. They value the independence that they get from working with their bodies and their physicality and their brawn. And that stuff has all become the object of sneering contempt by the elites, who have, as a result, totally undercut the ability of people who work in those industries to support a family. First, by, defunding vocational training, by signing disastrous trade deals like NAFTA, and then, of course, by importing, millions and millions and millions and millions of illegal immigrants to compete with people in these industries and drive down their wages. These are all the result of the utter contempt that the college-educated elites have for people who work with their hands for a living.
And that's the other point you make. I want to come back to a little bit more on your definitions on the working class, but it is puzzling to people to watch the Democrats open the borders of the country in such a profound way that tens of thousands of illegal immigrants coming in, and the immigrant communities who are in the U.S. legally, who have gone through all the paperwork and the time that it takes, are the first ones to say, this is taking our jobs. This is an attack on our income. And I can't for the life of me figure out why the Democrats have decided that illegal immigrants are a more important group than working Blacks in America or the working class in general. What was the thinking?
So it was very intentional. I think that Joe Biden thought that if he eased, so there was a very tight labor market, which meant that working class wages were actually going up. This started in 2019 under Donald Trump because, of course, he created an entire economy that catered to the working class. Donald Trump shrank income and wealth inequality in America, the first president to do so in 60 years. And so working class wages were on the rise, especially in the wake of the post-COVID labor crunch. Working class people were suddenly making more money than they had ever made before. And of course, to the Democrats, this was a disaster that had to be put a stop to, right? Because, in the Fed's logic, this is what drives inflation, working class people being able to feed their families. Nobody wants that. And so they thought themselves, well, how do you stop working class wages from rising? Oh, I've got it. Bring in 15 million people to compete with them in the labor market. And of course, the Democrats' base don't hurt from this because who is the Democrats' base? They have a coalition of the overeducated, overcredentialed elites who are the consumers of low-wage labor, right? So they love cheap labor. They love slaves coming in here from, all manner of failed socialist countries. But then also their other side of their base is the dependent poor, people who don't work, who, of course, are also not threatened by illegal immigrants coming in and taking their jobs because they don't work. And so the two sides of the Democrats' base only benefited from this influx of cheap labor. It was the Republicans' base, the working class, who saw all of this wage theft, who effectively were plundered by the elites who now had to pay their plumber or their nanny a fraction of what they would have had to pay if they were employing an American working class person. And the proof of this, I'm not, making this up. I mean, I predicted this before I had the proof, but right. The proof of it is that every time that you hear DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who's in charge of securing the border, anytime anyone asks him, why is the border so porous? Why are millions and millions of people coming here? He will straight up and say, American corporations are desperate for workers. He saw his job as using the cartels as a jobs program to import slaves to fill up meatpacking industry. And by the way, the meatpacking industry, that used to be the job to have. It was known that the hours were great, the benefits were great, the labor was great. Now those jobs are done by El Salvadorian teenagers, by girls who have been raped on the way here, whose mothers give them birth control before sending them off into the Darien Gap in the hands of these disgusting, murderous, terrorist cartels. That's who is packing our chicken now.
I mean, that's why you use the word slave, which is you think they're enslaved to the cartels, and
Oh,
that
yes, they get a bracelet on their way through the Darien Gap and it has a color and the color tells you how much their contract is to the cartels. If it's $5,000, if it's $10,000, if it's $20,000 based on where they came from, where in South America, where in China, what have you, anyone can get through. You get that bracelet and they have your address of your family. And so you become enslaved to the cartels. And, it's just horrific. I mean, every woman who makes that trip has some sort of sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape, it's horrific, horrific. And these people using their children it's just the whole situation is horrible.
But the impact on American cities and American states with this uncontrolled influx has also priced housing higher, has put huge strain on healthcare. The cities can't afford, they're paying thousands of hotel bills and buying cell phones. Like, there's got to be some concern. A lot of those mayors and governors are Democrats. They must have been reacting at some point saying, hold up here.
Yeah, they were definitely upset about it. Mayor Adams in my city, New York City, was very upset about it. He just kept saying, we have no more room. We're literally kicking Americans out of shelters. I volunteered at a soup kitchen. There were a few months in the summer last year, and then again in the fall. You would see the direct impact of the different policies in the soup kitchen. You would have people come in with 10, 11 children. It was clear that, you could tell which were their children and the rest had been handed to them as props by the cartels, and obviously we would run out of food much earlier because we were feeding so many children and so many people. Of course, that's our job as a soup kitchen, but we would have our regulars come in, at the regular time and we'd be out of food. And, this is the housing crisis. I mean, people will say like, on the aggregate, mass immigration raises the GDP. It's like, every single one of those people has to live somewhere, and we have a housing crisis. Don't tell me that, don't gaslight me and tell me this is good for us when what you mean is this is good for you.
Yeah. Your work on the working class, you've kind of divided it into three tiers, which I think is a really interesting way to try and understand what motivates them and why they are so upset. Why immigration has become a huge election issue, for example, but go through your tiers.
Yeah, so there's the top tier of the American working class who are solidly middle class. They're homeowners, they have a retirement, their kids are, at least doing as well as them, if not upwardly mobile, going to college or what have you. People like cops, sanitation workers, a lot of federal workers, people work in the post office, but also skilled trades folks, plumbers, electricians, contractors, welders. These are good jobs. Then you have the middle tier, and these are people like certified nurses, aides, and truck drivers, people who they're covering all their bills. They work really hard and they're probably making more now than they have in their lives, but they have zero retirement savings and they have no idea how they're going to retire, and they really don't have access to affordable, high quality health care. So, they're struggling from that point of view. I mean, they're paying all their bills, but they can't imagine ever retiring, and they can't afford a home, probably because they live in a blue area. So where the housing crisis is just like out of control. And then you really have the bottom tier of people who work and work and work and are just chronically behind on bills. They cannot get a foothold, any kind of stability. Every bill, is disastrous. They're constantly calling the electric company to beg forbearance and come up with payment plans and so forth. And these are people who work full time, often 2 or more jobs, and they just can't get any kind of stability.
And the response of governments is to really kind of treat them as the other category that you were talking about, is the people that don't really work, that live off welfare, off social insurance, etc., and that is in fact an anathema to the working class. Regardless of which of the three categories they're in, they're just saying, no, I actually want to work. I have a work ethic. Let me work. Don't give me more handouts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And before Trump, there were two models for the economy in America. There was the kind of redistributionist model, which is still the left's model, the Democrats' model, like let's raise taxes and then just give people more handouts. So every person who's struggling, even if they're, employed full time, making $50,000, $60,000 a year, we'll give them a housing voucher, so they'll never be a homeowner, but we'll help them pay their rent. We'll give them food stamps. Working class people don't like that. They really like want to stand on their own two feet. Autonomy is incredibly important to them. On the right, what you had was this trickle down economics, this idea that if you just slash taxes and open free trade, the rising tide will lift all boats. And that, of course, turned out to be nonsense as well. The model they really like is the Trump model, where what you do is you control immigration, so you control the supply of labor, and then you create trade that always favors the American worker. And that is the tide that raises the boat, which is you protect the labor of the American worker and create conditions. You deregulate, right? But maybe
Yeah.
you also raise taxes on the rich. And that combination creates favorable conditions where people want to invest in America and they end up paying their workers more.
But the attack on Trump for that has been it's sort of back to the future. You're going to save a dying coal industry, or you're going to, try and get the auto industry back and functioning in America when China can produce them so much more cheaply, or Mexico, and everybody wants a cheaper product. So he's kind of getting it on both sides, which is the consumers who want a cheaper product and people saying it's an old way to go about it. And we have to be way more concerned about the environment and all of those issues.
Yeah, I just think that's nonsense. Like, it's not like people aren't still making our cars. They are making our cars. They're just making them in China for cheaper. That's not a competitive advantage, right? That's not like the horse and buggy where like it really went away for a better product. We're using the same product, right?
Yeah.
We're just demanding. We have made the labor of the American worker too cheap relative to other countries. And a lot of that is through financialization. We allow China and Germany and all sorts of other countries to take all of their excess capital and invest it in the United States instead of in their own countries. And so they cheapen their own workers, which makes that comparison untenable. And when you have something like the USMCA, which Trump signed into law as opposed to NAFTA, he got rid of NAFTA, under the USMCA, basically something like 75%, I believe is the number, of every car that is sold in the United States without tariffs has to be made by somebody making at least $16 an hour. That's how you protect American labor. And, tariffs, elites hate tariffs because they want cheap stuff. You know who really likes tariffs? Working class people. They think a lot about tariffs and they really like tariffs. And whenever Trump promises a 10% tariff on every foreign import, the elites go crazy and the working class goes, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is really, and this whole shift has taken the Democrats used to be the voice of the working class, and the Republicans were the golf club set, and out there whining and dining, and there's just been sort of a 180 on those.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been we call it the political realignment, to where, it used to be the Democrats were the party of labor and the Republicans were the party of the country club. And now 75% of people making below the median income live in Republican districts. And
Mhm.
9 of the 10 richest counties in America are Democratic districts. 65% of Americans making $500,000 a year or more are Democrats. Silicon Valley, Democrats. Wall Street gave more to Joe Biden than they did to Donald Trump. They hate Donald Trump. So, you see this real political realignment.
One of the interesting techniques in your book is the people that you did actually go out and talk to and listen to and say, okay, why did you vote for Donald Trump, and why has this realignment, as you say, happened? You know that I'm going to pick Gord, the truck driver, because he's got his Canadian connection there, but now lives and works in the United States. Just briefly tell us his story.
Gord is an incredible, incredible human, and I'm going to do what he would want me to do, which is mention the Quds Four, who he has been a real champion of. He's written about them. I'm sure your audience is familiar with this story
Yeah.
about these political prisoners, 4 men, now 2 left, who the Trudeau administration arrested on spurious, trumped-up charges in order to justify the invocation of the Emergencies Act, and then has kept them in jail without bail for a year, I believe 2 years, going on two years now. An absolute atrocity. Simply political prisoners in Canada, who would have thought, because of the sort of liberal authoritarianism of Justin Trudeau. And Gord has been a real spokesperson for these guys. If you go to his either his Substack, which is Autonomous Truckers, or if you go to his Twitter, I think he's Voice of Gord or Gordy Locks or something like that.
Yeah.
He has the link for where you can donate, and he would want me to mention that. Gord is really an incredible person. He's a truck driver. He let me get in his rig and go trucking with him for a day and opened my eyes to a lot of the issues that I think about now. He's originally from Canada. He's always been a trucker, although now he's been laid off from trucking and he's doing construction work. I mean, he's exactly the personification of the American working class. He's brilliant with his hands. He loves being in the truck. He loves the autonomy and the freedom that he gets from being able to support himself and his family, but he cannot afford to buy a home and doesn't think he ever will be able to in America. He doesn't have any retirement savings. And this is a guy who really works really, really hard. And when he's not working, he's raising his gorgeous 2 little daughters with his wife, Jenna. Just a beautiful American family who are making, about $100,000 a year and just cannot achieve the American dream despite working so hard. So shout out to my guy, Gord McGill.
But that is I guess that's the hope that people need to hear. And, everybody's always confused as to why would people like Gord support Donald Trump. And you kind of, you watch the transformation of J.D. Vance, now the vice presidential candidate. This was a guy who came out of the Rust Belt, who was poor, out of a democratic state. He would have started there. That's what it would have been his view. Really, I mean, some tough stuff he said about Trump, who's now standing there beside him saying, we need to deal and help in a real way these people. They are at the heart of the country.
Definitely.
Can he do it?
It really depends on how they perform going forward. When they were running against Joe Biden, I felt pretty sure that they could. If the campaign gets ugly, a lot of those gains with the working class with people of color are gonna evaporate. So, it's really hard to say. Donald Trump, I think, has really amazing political instincts. But he's also a fighter, he's not afraid of getting into the gutter and fighting. So we'll see what happens. I don't think Kamala Harris is a very strong candidate. I don't think she could have gotten to the top of a presidential ticket any other way than this. We know that because she dropped out of the presidential primary before a single vote was cast when she tried. But we'll see how things go.
This is all very reflective of your own personal transformation as well. I mean, just watching you and knowing your work, there you were, the typical media elite member, ready to pop the champagne, for Hillary Clinton. And
I literally had a bottle of champagne with me, and I had to take that bottle of champagne home.
But now you have, I mean, did the process of speaking to the Gords of the world and actually going out and listening to what people were saying, is that what changed you? Like, how did that process occur?
I think it started much earlier. I became very disgusted with my side before I was able to admire the achievements of the other side. I'm sure that happens to a lot of people where, I remember, like, during the racial moral panic in 2019, 2020, feeling like, well, they're really wrong about this. I wonder if they're wrong about other things. And then suddenly being like, okay, well, they're wrong about that. I think probably they're obviously wrong about Donald Trump was like maybe the last thing to go. For a long time, I was one of those. There's a lot of liberals who are like disgusted with the far left, but have not been able to get there. And to me, it was sort of like the humility of realizing that I had been so wrong, but working class people who have not had access to the kinds of educational resources I have, who don't opine on politics for a living, had been so right. Like that was very, I mean, it was actually, it was, there's something very like euphoric about learning you were wrong about something in a very big way, but I was very wrong and they were very right. And so now it seems to me like there's this kind of symbiotic relationship where Trump really is a reflection of like the electorate, like the normies, you know, it's like normies of the world unite, like, you know what I mean? And he's done such smart things like rejecting Project 2025, culling all pro-life language from the GOP platform. The first time in 40 years, it's not pro-life, taking out any language against gay marriage. Like he just has a real understanding for where the American working class is at. And so I admire that a lot. And that kind of like the rejection of the elites on his side in favor of the voter base. I think that's what democracy looks like.
I know your time is tight. I'm just going to take
Yes.
one more minute because what I found so interesting in this book is that the working class is very diverse. It's not a monolith, and you met women who were opposed to abortion, but also opposed to abortion ban. They want to keep choice for others. They want taxes on the rich to be higher and still have a Medicare system. And you actually say polarization that we all spend endless hours talking about is just really an elite phenomenon, not a working class phenomenon.
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely right. American voters who are working class people, whether they vote for Democrats or Republicans, they have a very similar worldview. It's just that neither party represents them. And so they're kind of stuck just with a crapshoot and they'll pick one or the other, but it doesn't have any spiritual significance to them like it does to the elites. They're very, very unified.
Yeah, really interesting book, Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. The author, Batya Ungar-Sargon, just so you recognize it there when you're looking for it. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll be back knocking on your door again to talk about this, the state of your nation and how it impacts ours. So thanks for
Thank
your
you
time.
so much. Thank you, darling. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Bye-bye now. And that is it for this edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin. We'll talk soon.